Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Richard Skipper celebrates the best in entertainment. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. I guess you've all survived Thanksgiving. What is it that you're celebrating today? I hope you're celebrating Irving Berlin, the opening of a new musical called Cheek to Cheek. I'm very excited today because we have Barry Kleinbort and Randy Skinner, and they are here today to celebrate this brand new Irving Berlin musical. Now, there was a time when Irving Berlin would be opening a musical like White Christmas, There's No Business Like Show Business, Holiday Inn, Easter Parade. All of those musicals have something in common. They were catalog musicals, jukebox musicals, if you will, that cataloged the Irving Berlin songbook. And before we jump in, my show is all about celebration, guys. Welcome to the show, first of all. And I'll start with you, Barry, since you and I have known each other the longest. What are you celebrating these days beyond the obvious that you've got a new show opening?
Yes, I mean, I was going to say getting up in the morning, but I'll take it one step further, which is that this wonderful musical review about Irving Berlin that Randy enlisted me to be a part of, and we're having a wonderful time celebrating one of the greatest songwriting talents of the 20th century, and I think part of our mission is that he's not forgotten. And that a new generation discovers or rediscovers Irving Berlin. And that's part of our affection for the material too, I think. Randy, would you agree? I think so.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let me show a little clip of the rehearsal process, a little bit of that, and then we'll come back and we're going to pick up and talk about how this all came to be. Here you are in rehearsal.
A lot done on Irving Berlin's earlier years. A lot of reviews about Tin Pan Alley, his Broadway stuff, but to my knowledge, that's why I came up with the idea that there's nothing been centering on the Hollywood years, which was a real distinct period for him.
He reinvented himself at a time when people didn't reinvent themselves to become a movie songwriter. He was 40 years old, and he could have sat on his laurels, and instead he said, there's this newfangled invention called movies, and they're making musicals, and I'm going to get in on it.
He's the most danceable composer that I know of, and he wrote 3 movies for Fred and Ginger. And then, of course, he started off with ragtime. So this man understood dancing, he understood rhythm, he understood certainly melody.
One of the first things to be minimized in more modern musical theater shows is dancing, and that's a violation when you consider the history of musical theater. It was the dancers that could sing and also act that brought us to the climax of a musical theater number, which is dancing.
There's a great guide trio to a great song called Drum Crazy that's just a showstopper at 11 o'clock number, and I can't get enough of it.
these songs, singing these songs in particular, is that they have such a big range. Also, just making sense of the lyrics, which are so filled with imagery. It's been a joy to kind of dig into these songs and really put our own flavor on them.
There are so many songs that he wrote. He just kept creating, even if it wasn't used. There's a whole bunch of trunk songs. It's amazing that he wrote so many.
Over 1,500 songs. I didn't know that either.
He wrote songs for 2 world wars, a depression, the Korean War, the Cold War, and he kept turning out optimistic songs to try to keep America happy and hopeful.
There's a song that hasn't been published before this show that I get to sing with someone else, not with Victoria, unfortunately. But it's called I Used to Play It By Ear, which is fast becoming one of my favorite Irving Berlin songs.
I poured my heart into a song, and I'm afraid the words I chose are not so smart.
I would love for people to come away from leaving the show with 90 minutes of escapism. There's so much going on in the world, in our country, and to just be able to sit and watch something and come together. I mean, we haven't been able to perform in 18 months, so it's really exciting for us to be out there, and I hope that people walk away from the show with just an enormous sense of joy.
You should come see Cheek to Cheek because the music is absolutely stunning and the talent on the stage is like astronomical.
You need to come see Cheek to Cheek because it's got some of the greatest music in the history of songwriting. Wonderful opportunities for all kinds of dancing, from tap to theater jazz to ballroom, so it runs the gamut. But mostly important, in addition to all of that, there's a story and you walk away knowing the man and learning about the man in a very entertaining way.
And I will be there Wednesday night, and I can't wait. Before we delve into the show, I want to talk first of all about the York Theater. Thank God that we still have the York Theater. It survived COVID and floods and everything else. But I want to talk about both of you and your history with the York Theater. And I'll start with you, Barry. Why the York Theater and where it fits into your history?
Well, it's interesting. I used to go see the productions at the York when it was all on East 90th Street, when it was first starting out under Janet Hayes Walker. And I thought it was so interesting that she was trying to do shows that hadn't been revived in New York, like The Golden Apple and Anyone Can Whistle and things that now are more and more in the consciousness. But at the time, they weren't. So it really served a niche for the community. My involvement with the York didn't start until fairly recently, but I always knew Jim and I always knew the company. And I was enlisted during COVID. I was enlisted to put together a bunch of cabaret performances to keep the York out there online. And so we did
which were incredible, I might add, by the way.
Yeah, oh, well, thanks. But again, we were working under very tricky circumstances. We had all COVID requirements. There was no vaccine when we did this, so we really had to be extra careful. But it was a way of keeping the organization out there. And that was a lovely experience for all of us because we felt we were really keeping something going in a time of such uncertainty. We were supposed to, Randy and I were supposed to go into rehearsal on March 20th, I think it was, Randy, for this show of 2020 that had been planned months before that. And then everything, as you know, closed down on the 12th of March. And we kept hoping that things would pass so that this thing is finally coming to fruition now is such a gift. It's such a feeling of completion for us. So this is really my second experience with the York, really. Randy, have you had more?
Yes, it was actually going to be the
closing performance of their 50th anniversary season in 2020.
Mm.
That's what Jim had planned, and Ricky Kane Larimer, and then it all got canceled, of course. So now we're opening the 2021 season. So it's just, I guess it's their 51st year. But I had seen many shows at the York, but this is my first experience of working for them, and it's a great organization. They've given us everything we need, and there's been a lot of joy with getting back into the studio. That's the dancers were all talking about, the cast that first day. They got a little teary-eyed because dancers need to dance. I think it's been the hardest on them during COVID. Singers can sing in their apartment. Actors can study monologues and read plays. And there were a lot of classes going on all during COVID. But it's not like being in a room with the energy of the other dancers and hearing the music live. So everybody did their best to keep up their skills. But I think dancers have had the hardest thing. So they just were so joyful to be back in the room and to truly be doing what they love.
And a huge shout out to Ricky Kane Larimer. I hope she's watching because anybody who knows her loves her. She's an incredible powerhouse, and lucky day for the York Theater when they connected. Of course, she was the driving force behind Cagney, and now how lucky you are that she is behind this as well. How did this all come to be?
Well, I met Ricky at a Christmas party about 3 years ago, and that's really how it all started. And it was just such a fortuitous meeting. We sat on a couch and talked, and then I took her the idea, and she just loved this era and loved tap dancing, of course, because of Cagney also and her love of that. And it just, then she said, I think it's perfect for the York. So then she took it to Jim, and we had a meeting, and it was just so easy and effortless because of her. And I've always admired Jim's work, and so it was just a natural fit to have him do the set. And then he had a lot of people that he had worked with as far as lighting and sound and all of that. And when you go into a regional theater or an off-Broadway theater, it's just wise to use people that know the space, know them. Of course, we're in a new space now, so everybody had to learn that. But I think it's just always a good idea to always take the recommendations of the theater, like who understands how the operation works and the organization, because there's always tricky things with off-Broadway. It's always limited budgets and limited time and a lot of rules depending on the contract. So it turned out to be a terrific creative team that they were, the lighting guy, Jason Kantrowitz, I knew him well, but everybody else was new to me. And I love meeting new people on projects. I just think it's fun to work with new people.
And how did the two of you come together to work on this project?
Well, how long have I known you, Barry? I don't even know.
Well, I'd say it's over 20 years.
Probably.
Randy and I met doing a project with Mary Claire Heron and Richard Rodney Bennett in Poughkeepsie, New York. And it was, and we had a wonderful time. And then Randy and I would run into each other all the time. And our conversations, we knew we were on the same page. This is really important. If you want to know why collaborations don't work, it's because from the get-go, they don't see the same things. I remember Harold Prince once said, you can argue about the little things, but you have to agree on all the big things or the show's not going to work. And we really had the sensibility, and which would lead to conversations, but because we knew each other agreed with what we were thinking about something, that we were common spirits. So Randy had this idea about Irving Berlin in Hollywood, and he said, I want you to write the script. And it was really a joyful experience because we really saw the thing the same way. And that's how that happened.
And again, when you have that, Richard, it's effortless.
You want to
have people, it's just effortless because you can discuss anything and whittle away at everything. It's really wonderful. Yeah. And Barry's so knowledgeable and has such a history of the art form and of all the composers and things.
Randy, how long has this idea been germinating in your head?
Oh, probably for about 5 years. I mean, I've been busy with
of course, the two monster shows that never go away, 42nd Street and White Christmas. So again, I think because of my involvement with transferring that to the stage, 19 years ago, I've always had Irving Berlin on my mind. And I have a nice relationship with the estate and had met the daughters on different occasions. And I just have always, he's my favorite composer. And I've always thought, there's got to be something out there to do, because he doesn't have a lot of book shows that are done. That's why they were so interested when the idea of transferring White Christmas to the stage came up, because people, of course, do Annie Get Your Gun. But some of the other shows that he wrote for the stage are very topical. And I've read them all because they all have great scores. And so I'm always thinking, can they be done without a major rewrite? And there's just so much topicality to them that, like when Encores did Call Me Madam, I took somebody, one of my ladies who assists me on shows, and she's at the time was around mid-30s, and she didn't really know any of the references to the show in Call Me Madam. And we talked about it after. She loved it. She had a great time, and she loved the score, of course.
Don't tell me she didn't know who Promesta was.
I had an idea years ago before all of this stuff happened with colorblind casting, way before this. I thought the world of Call Me Madam would have been fascinating to be played by Nell Carter and put a whole twist on it.
Well, Leslie Uggams did do
did she?
production of it. Yeah, I didn't she do it at Paper Mill Playhouse? Barry, do you know?
Leslie Uggams did
Leslie
it at
Uggams.
Paper Mill.
I didn't know that because I'd worked with Leslie. But yeah, so we were on the same page, Paper Mill and myself, thinking of doing a twist on the role of Promesta. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's
he's right about Nell Carter. That would have
been fantastic. But yeah, no, it's just the idea had been brewing, and I just thought I would love to do something, and that's Berlin being a passion, and then my love of Hollywood and Hollywood films, not just musicals, but anything with film. And so it was just, that's how the idea came.
So you're so enmeshed in the world of Irving Berlin and Hollywood. What have you learned that's new about Irving Berlin that surprised you working on this project that you did not know about him prior to working on this project?
Probably, I knew
he was a businessman.
Yeah. And also,
but what I was going to say, Randy, is
the depression and the anxiety that he suffered. I think it's always interesting when you learn about somebody who basically lived the American dream and had such success, and then you realize then towards the end of his life and later career, he chose to be more isolated. He kept in touch by telephone with some of his closest friends. But, I think he probably suffered a lot in those later years when he was watching everything change and the music industry change, and then just dealing with getting older. There's been quite a bit written, of course, about Stephen Sondheim with his death a couple days ago, and just what people go through in the aging process, particularly if you live into your 90s, and he was 101, and then you see everything changing. I mean, anybody who stays in the business long enough, as it keeps evolving, you either choose to go with the flow and do your best to stay on top of it, or you, have a retirement and then you deal with everything that goes along with that.
So as you started working on this project, what was the starting off point for both of you?
Barry?
Well, if you talk about Irving Berlin, Hollywood, it seems to me it's a huge catalog. And one of the things that we had to do was isolate what we wanted to deal with in terms of him. And so we didn't do any of the musical adaptations. We didn't do the film of Annie Get Your Gun or film of Call Me Madam. We zeroed in on the things that he wrote songs specifically for films. And every song that's in this show is from a movie. It's not something that was interpolated into a movie. It was written for a movie. So that was part of our process of the catalog is so huge. It's so vast. We had to find some way to keep it tight. And Randy wanted to make sure that he was nominated for 8 Oscars. And he wanted to make sure that all the Oscar nominated songs were included in the project. He really, we did research on this, and he really got more nominations than a lot of his peers did over the years. Really surprising. So he was really venerated for almost his entire career.
Yes, I'd given Garry a list of songs that I wanted to dance to. That's also a starting point when you're dealing with a musical that's going to have a lot of dancing. But I do think the important thing was we did decide to just truly do music that he specifically wrote for the film, because a film like Alexander's Ragtime Band had original songs that he wrote in 1938 for the movie, but also had interpolations from earlier song hits. Same thing with White Christmas, the 1954. Now, Holiday Inn, 1942, that was all an original score. But then in 1954, he used some old songs from his trunk and also from prior movies, but then wrote new music in 1954. I think that's what makes the movie interesting and the show interesting, is that it's all original songs for each specific movie. And then we wanted to have some gems that maybe other people wouldn't know. And I always love that when you're doing a show, or when I go to see a show that actually is dealing with a composer. It's really fun to discover songs that people go, wow. And we've had a lot of comments from the audience, like, I didn't know that song. And the melodies that we've chosen for the show are all such beautiful songs. So it's been surprising to people to have a few gems. And then in 1965 and 63, when they started the Say It With Music, to hear a song that's never been published has been really exciting. And Barry can tell you about that.
Can you talk a little bit about Say It With Music and what, I mean, is this being dramatized in the show? Because I don't want any spoilers, obviously. And, you know, there was
we talked about it.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You know, we talk about, but the thing is, Arthur Freed was who was the head of MGM Musicals department. He adored Berlin, and he wanted Berlin to have one last hurrah. And he wanted for not only for Berlin, but for Arthur Freed, he wanted his last musical at MGM, because he knew he was going to be let go. He wanted to do one last tribute to Irving Berlin. And so he wanted to do this extravaganza, knockout extravaganza, and Berlin said it'd be called Say It With Music. And they had so many book writers. We've talked about Arthur Lawrence, Betty Comden and Adolph Green, Sidney Sheldon, George Wells. The last person to buy was Blake Edwards. He bought it as a wedding gift for Julie Andrews when he got married to Julie Andrews, and he wanted her to star in the movie. He thought that would be the greatest. And what happened was the change of regime over the 6 years that it took to get Say It With Music on. Dr. Dolittle happened, Star happened, all of these big mega musicals that did not do well at the box office. And they said musicals are over, and that's the end of Say It With Music. But during the 6 years, Berlin kept writing, because they kept changing the book. And every time he got a new script, he came up with something else to put in the script. And at one point, it was going to be the story of his life. They really wanted it to be a biography of him, and which is something that he had never wanted earlier in his life, but was willing to let them do at this point. So what I think is sad is that he never got that last send-off. He didn't get it because the project was shelved, and that was the end of that. So I think that also made him more of a recluse at the end of his life, because he felt obsolete.
But then Barry had, in his possession, he had 5, I think it was 5 that we looked at, songs from the movie that he had written. And so we got into a room with a pianist, and we played all 5, and there was one that just stood out to all of us in the room. And so we used that in the show. It's the second to the closing number, and that's been it's gotten great response, because nobody's ever heard the song. And it's typically wonderful Berlin melody and wonderful lyrics about love and rediscovering love. And it's been fun to see. I mean, it gets a really huge reaction.
And this is the first time that this song is being heard anywhere?
Yes.
Wow. That's an
as far as,
see everyone.
but,
You've got to be there for this.
Every time I see the show and that moment comes in the show, I well up, because the song is every bit as good as anything he wrote in his 70 earlier years. And the harmonies, he does some really interesting harmonic choices in the song that they're really surprising. It's not same old, same old. It's a very sophisticated piece of composition, and for someone who was not trained as a musician, but he had an unbelievable ear for melody, and he heard things. He heard the harmonies. So it wasn't just like he plunked out a melody line and somebody else put chords to it. He really heard this thing. And that moment every night, it just floors me. And the audience too, Randy is talking about, it's true. Everybody just loves this moment.
Now, how many songs are in this show, and how many songs, Randy, did you present to Barry initially before the script started being written?
I'm trying to pull up our list because it's
okay.
Hard to remember everything. Let me see, where am I at? I'll have it in a second. Okay, here we are. Let's see. We cheek song listing.
Don't give them away. No spoilers.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. There's like 22 full moments in the show. And some of them, and they're complete moments. We don't ever do a medley. You know, a lot of reviews and a lot of shows that honor composers love to get everything in there. That's another thing Barry and I talked about. You know, we didn't want to do like a 10-minute medley of stringing things together. So every moment on stage is a total moment with a beginning, middle, and end in its own arc, particularly the dance numbers. And it runs the gamut from group numbers to solos to duets. And so it was pretty clear what we wanted to do. We didn't really look at, because again, of a lot of his movies having interpolated songs, not every movie had like 10 songs to choose from that were all original. So we really, by zeroing in on the ones that he wrote for that movie, it did limit the list. And then that's how we started whittling away. Yeah. And there's a couple really...
there are a couple of things.
Oh, go ahead, Barry.
Oh, what I was going to say, Randy, is last night I had two people there who were 20 years old apiece, and they loved the show. One of them said to me, "And you didn't sing White Christmas. How great!" They thought that was the greatest. They had made
I'm sure that there are a lot of
going to do, and
there are so many songs that he wrote that I'm sure that there are people who go expecting that they're going to hear their favorite Irving Berlin song.
Yeah.
And obviously they're sitting there waiting for that song, unless of course they've gotten the program and they've looked through and they go, well, why is this song missing? And you've explained your reasons for that. But there's so many songs to choose from. How did you choose?
One thing I want to say, Randy, I just wanted to say this one thing. Randy had wanted to make sure that we included some of the dance crazes for the films that Berlin had written for, because he was amazing in terms of creating novelty numbers. And that comes from his years in Tin Pan Alley of writing novelty tunes. But he saw that Astaire and Rodgers, who he was writing for, that they had introduced other dance crazes. And he was going to keep coming up with new novelties for them to do. And that was an important thing for Randy to have in the show, and for me too, because it really showed that he never said, "Oh no, I can't do that." I don't think there's a moment I write a song about. He could write a song about any single thing. And he would take an idea from anybody and anything. That he wrote a song called "The Yam," which you feature in the show, about sweet potatoes, but he made it to be a dance craze, and it's one of the high points of the show. And Mary Ellen Barrett, originally when we showed her what we were going to do, said to Randy, "Why would you want to do that song?" But it gets such a response every night, and it's because people are just amazed that he could make a song out of that. And he's so playful. He says, let's do a yam session. And I don't know if the audience gets it or not, but I crack up every performance at that line.
It's also one of the few songs that Ginger sang. She sang sometimes with Fred in her movies, but she wasn't always handed a lot of solos. And the Yam is one number that is totally her song. She sings the entire song. She also sings the Piccolino. Funny enough, the two dance crazes are sung by Ginger and not Fred.
Oh,
then they go into these they go into these big production numbers. But so it's always fun for me because I was close to Ginger at the end of her life. We worked together on several occasions. So I feel like I'm kind of including something in this evening that she actually premiered, because everybody thinks of Fred always premiering the Berlin songs, but Ginger had two of these songs in our show where she sang the solos.
That's wonderful. And I want to ask you, are you focusing on a particular period in his time in Hollywood, or is it covering all of his years in Hollywood?
No, it covers all. Barry, we started the show with his first for United Artists, Reaching for the Moon, and then it ends with Say It With Music, the musical that never was, that wonderful line that Barry has written, the big movie musical that never was.
Right.
It's so it really does trace from the beginning of when he first went out to California to when he basically retired.
Well, I have a question from your esteemed publicist, Philip Carumba, who's watching the show, and he wants to know, Randy, what is your favorite number in the show?
You know, the number that I really had a great time doing, and it's not the biggest number in the show, but I love Back to Back. And it's another number that Mary Ellen Barrett questioned, but then word had gotten back to her that these were two very successful numbers, the Yam and Back to Back. And it's such, again, a clever lyric that it appears in a movie called Second Fiddle. And the whole thing is staged with partnering, and they're all back to back dancing and doing all sorts of patterns on stage and steps. And that took a lot of rehearsal so that you didn't trip up your partner, because you're not looking at each other, and making sure you're not clipping the heels of each other. And I think the kids have a good time with that one too. So and it's actually Rob Berman, my dance arranger and the wonderful conductor of Encores. I was talking to Rob. He's going to be seeing the show next week, I think. And he said, I just love Back to Back. It's my favorite number. So that's been kind of, I would say that's the one I really get tickled by, but I love them all. It's hard to choose, you know, and they're all so well performed by this cast. They're all wonderful dancers. So it's been a joy to watch all the numbers.
If I'm not mistaken, Irving Berlin probably had more, if you will, jukebox musicals made of his catalog of music than any other composer in Hollywood. Am I right?
Barry, Barry could chime in on that, the historian.
I think Gershwin has had more using his catalog than Irving Berlin. And part of that is that Berlin was very protective of his catalog. And in the time that he lived, he never wanted anybody to do a review of his songs because he wanted to keep control. One of the things that we talk about in the show that I think is we really talk about Berlin as the band as well as the composer. And he changed the laws in Hollywood forever because his businessman acumen. He really changed how deals were made. He was the first one, and everyone followed suit afterwards. Really remarkable. So he was not only talented and gifted, he was very savvy. He really understood, you know, they fooled him once and he came back loaded for bear. and said, that's not going to happen again. If you want me, these are the terms. And it's changed every contract for decades now. So that's part of the story that I think people are surprised by or don't know. A lot don't know. And so, he must have been a remarkable individual on so many fronts, because he thought of so many things and was very protective. But anyhow, getting back to your thing about reviews, I'd say Gershwin first would be the one who probably had the most, because I mean, certainly Crazy for You and My One and Only, and several catalog reviews. We're hoping that this will have a life beyond the York, because it's a very special show. Mary Ellen Barrett, eldest of the daughters, said to Randy and me, shows about my father aren't usually this good. And that was a lovely compliment. Yeah, that was a lovely compliment to us, because she's
And we kept her abreast of everything along the way, and would send her the script and make sure that everything. And it's a couple questions came up in some of the talkbacks this weekend, and it was about how do you deal with the estates? And I've always said, if you get to know the estates and get to know the direct descendants and the people, and then they like what you do and you earn their trust, then it also makes it a much easier journey than if you put something up that is so different or really disrespectful or is such a 180-degree turn that it frightens them away. And so I think Mary Ellen certainly has trusted Barry and I that her dad is in good hands, and that we are presenting the material and his life story very truthfully, his Hollywood years very truthfully, and the music is being presented very honorably. And yet, when you have it done by young people, it puts a whole spin on it anyway, because you've got that energy of youth up there, bringing that to Irving Berlin. And he's so youthful anyway. No matter how old he was, he wrote youthful songs.
That's absolutely true. And I mean, let's talk a little bit about the cast. The casting of this show. You have an amazing cast. Their names were on the screen before. How did you go about the casting for this show?
Well, because you're looking for people that can do all three equally well, like we always say, the triple threat. And triple threat meaning also this level of dancing, because not every time you need a dancer, it has to be this particular level, but this show is pretty demanding. So they were pretty much handpicked. We did, because of COVID, have to replace a couple people, because 18 months later, schedules had changed. And so the last castmate to join us was Victoria Bird. And she's pretty much 1 year out of college. And we saw a virtual tape of her, because of course there's all sorts of rules now about how actors are auditioning. So I viewed a tape, and the musical director, David Hancock Turner, we viewed a tape. We gave her material to sing. And then I liked what I saw, so we gave her a second song. And then I met with her. We met outside of Lincoln Center at the library and sat on a ledge there and talked for about an hour. And I said, yes, this is going to be a very good fit. And so she is totally new to me. And then Melanie Moore and I had tried to work together about 3 years ago. I had offered her something in a new musical, and she was hoping to get a leave of absence at the time from Hello, Dolly. But I think right at the time we offered her the part, Bet was returning to the show to close the show, and she wanted everybody around her that she was used to. So they didn't grant Melanie that leave of absence. But then flash forward 3 years, and it was the perfect show. So I picked up the phone and called her, and so everybody was new to me. Everybody was familiar to me except for Victoria, and she's just turned out to be a wonderful addition to the group. So it's it's nice when you can do that, when you know that you have people that when you're thinking of a show that you can pretty much have in mind, like, this is going to be a good fit. Now you have to have all sorts of ideas beyond that, because you never know. Life can throw curves at you, as we all know.
Well, so speaking of curves, where were you in the process when everything shut down on March 12th, when COVID first came to our doorsteps?
Well, we were ready to go. It was all cast, and the schedule was in place. We had rehearsal dates, and everything was set. And so we just kind of kept waiting. We kept getting emails from New York, sit tight. We're still hoping to do it. Everybody was going through that, no matter what your show was. And then 1 month, of course, turned into 2, into 3, into 4. And then the writing was on the wall, obviously. So we just figured out, well, when it happens, will we be starting over with a whole new cast? The show was there. So we knew we had the show. So it was really just logistics of casting. Whenever we got the call to go back into rehearsal, we were going to have to deal with either having everybody available or having to replace.
Now, with most shows, I mean, you have a preview period. Did you make a lot of adjustments during the preview period, or has the show pretty much stayed as you created it?
Well, because it's so well written, there's been a few tweaks here and there, but nothing major.
For example, I had a line that started ads announced, ads, ADS, and I realized that from the audience point of view, it sounded like and that they didn't understand the sentence. That's the kind of stuff that you don't know until you get in front of an audience and you go, what are they hearing? I know what she's saying, but they don't. And as soon as I changed it to posters, everybody in the audience understood what she was talking about. Those tweaks, that's stuff that happens, but the show was there. And what I think is amazing is it's like a string of firecrackers, because Randy has come up with these dances and the audience knows what's coming. I don't know what all that dinging is. The audience, what's coming next? A tap routine, a specialty number. One of the showstoppers is a vocal. Nobody sees that coming, but Caitlin brings down the house every performance with "Love You Didn't Do Right by Me." She just does. So it's these things that they think they've seen everything, and there's still something waiting round the bend that surprises them, delights them. And as I said before about the young people, what I think is so important is that they come to see the show, and it's not a nostalgia trip for them. It's really a little bit of education about a musical past and a giant, and they're walking away with a new appreciation of him and the medium and what he did to the medium. And that, I think, is our job. I think Randy and I feel our responsibility, and Richard, you certainly feel this too. We have to keep reminding people of how great these people of the past were. Because if we stop talking about it, it's all over. They will just disappear into the ether, and we have to keep reminding them. And we couldn't have done this show. The show
but I heard something that Aaron. I heard something that Erin Davies said last night about Stephen Sondheim, and she said, "Imagine that all of us were alive when Stephen Sondheim was here, and all of us were alive. I used to go Christmas caroling with John Wallowich, and we used to go to Irving Berlin's home. Wow. That was a Christmas tradition. And he would be upstairs.
Absolutely.
I don't know if either of you know about that, or if you ever did that. They're on the Upper East Side.
I didn't do it, but I knew about
it. Place. So that was part of my Christmas Eve tradition for years.
All of my students.
Sondheim, Irving Berlin.
All of my students who have come have really enjoyed and loved learning about the man and how clever he was, but also discovering the songs if they didn't know them. A lot of them are known by particularly people in the industry, but the younger people are just reacting and responding incredibly well, because it's they're seeing what they want to do up on stage, so it's and I talked about this at the talkback yesterday, that and overall each number has to have an arc. When you're dealing with a show that has a lot of dancing in it, each number itself has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and a journey. But then the overall show has to have an arc. So if you open with a big tap number, which we do, then you better make sure you have something that can top it down the road. So it's challenging. It's very challenging, what I call a dance-driven musical, and I've done quite a few of them at Encores and then in my career. So they take a lot of thought, so that you're taking the audience along with you, and that doesn't mean it has to be another dance number. But you like Barry said, Caitlin and Love You Didn't Do Right by Me. I know that can really, you can follow a big dance number with a song like that and delivered like that, and then that takes you up on another crest. So it doesn't necessarily have to be dancing that tops dancing. It can be vocal, but you've got to plan it pretty carefully, how you're going to map out the entire evening to take the audience on the journey.
Well, this may sound like an odd question that I'm going to ask each of you, but Barry, what about your life experience are you bringing to the table in terms of shaping this particular production, in terms of your love of Irving Berlin? And I know that you've worked with our dear friend Anita Gillette, who has a rich history with Irving Berlin. And was she able to give you any insight on the man himself?
Well, the only the insight. I'm sorry, I'm plagued with something. I don't know what it is. Sorry. The only insight that Anita gave me was that they talked about very ordinary things. That they didn't sit and talk about Nietzsche and about world politics. They talked about fishing. They both would talk about rods and reels. They both loved fish. So, and he wrote about it in several of his songs. So even in Cheek to Cheek, when he says, "I love to go out fishing," you know, exactly. He really meant everything he wrote. He loved to fish. And in fact, my favorite lyric of his of all time is not in the show, but it's from the song "Lazy," which is that, with a great big valise full of books to read where it's peaceful.
Peaceful, yes.
That is fantastic writing. The valise full and peaceful, where you don't see it coming and you wonder how's he going to end the line. But they talked about just really ordinary things. And in fact, Anita, what she said to me is he was very fatherly. And when her marriage was in trouble, she talked to him. He was her counselor of what to do when the marriage was going south. And she felt that comfortable. And that was the stuff they talked about. They didn't talk about the state of Broadway. They didn't, it was really, he was just, when he was not working, he was a very personal, humble, ordinary individual. An extraordinary person, an ordinary individual. So, but what I wanted to bring to the show, and to answer your question, is I think it's important that even in the 1920s, that when the world thought you were done, that you say, "I'm not done yet," which is what happened to him. They thought he was through at the age of 40. They thought he was finished. And he said, "I just need to find another venue, another world to conquer, but I'm not done." And he believed that right up to the end. You know, when they were talking about Sondheim in his last interview, I don't know if you read the thing in the New York Times, but he said, "I'm 91. All I want to do is write." He said, I want to travel. I don't feel legs are going to travel. All I want to do is write. And I believe that was true for Irving Berlin, too. I think that Charles Strauss is a friend of mine, and nothing makes him happier than sitting at the piano to this day and playing the piano and thinking about the next show. That was who these guys were. And if people said no to them, they never heard it. They kept going. And that buoys me. That makes me want to go out there and conquer the world. So when I watch the show every time, and I just want to say, Joe Medeiros, who Randy has cast to play Berlin in the show, is a scary Berlin lookalike. Every time he comes on that stage, you almost think that Berlin has metamorphosed, it's just morphed from somewhere and is walking out on that stage. it really is amazing that he found him. I knew you'd worked with him before, but still, that when he comes on stage, I'm telling you, Richard, it's just eerie. It's just
Wow,
eerie.
that's great.
That's the okay.
And the same question for you, Randy. Your life experience that you're bringing to the table, and your knowledge and love of Berlin as well.
I think I wanted to bring my belief in simplicity and clarity, because I always have felt that you should be able, on a stage show, know exactly where to look at all times. And I know we're in a different world today where there's so much going on in shows. And I always equate it, say, I sometimes can't even find the person in the spotlight that's singing because there's just so much going on. And that's wonderful in its own way. But I do love focus, and I love clarity, and I love simplicity. And that's how I try to live my life. And my surroundings, my apartment, everything about it, I try to keep it very unencumbered. So when I approach Berlin, because he's pretty much known for being so simplistic, but within that simplicity, there's wonderful layers. So that's what I tried to honor and bring my life experience, just even in the rehearsal process, so that it's calm and that everybody has enough time to learn everything and feel secure. I always want my act, because I still perform occasionally when something's age appropriate and they need a dancer. I always say that the older you get, the list gets shorter and shorter of who can still do things, particularly dancing. And one of my great joys was when Karen Ziemba and I played opposite each other in Encores On Your Toes, when Warren Carlyle cast us as the mom and pop. And it was so much fun to be with a buddy like that and be on stage again and dancing. So I just always try to bring that spirit to the room, so that they feel that they're going to be in good hands and be very well protected. And we had an injury, a slight injury happen early on in rehearsal. So then I'm very careful about how then the rest of the time is treated, so that people really do feel taken care of. Dancers are getting beat up a lot today. People have a vision of what they want to see on stage, and I'll go to see things and I'll go, well, that would be great in a movie, shoot, rest. But, I go, how do they do this 8 times a week? Same thing with vocals. You do hear stories with a lot of people blowing out their voices now and having injuries when they're 19, 20 years old. And, freak things can always happen in a show. But I think in prior years, that was not part of the whole system. You weren't being asked to do things. The ballet world would never be like that. The opera world is not like that. And so I try to approach musicals the same way, that you hit the stage and you're joyful and you're not fearing anything, or you're not hurting, while you're doing. And I always say, if you fear something or if it's going to hurt, it doesn't really belong in a situation where you're having to do it 8 times a week. That's another medium where you can rest in between shots. But 8 times a week, I know as a performer myself, I just want to feel free and not have to worry about anything out there. I get very involved with the surfaces of my shows, decks, because there's nothing worse than dancing on a deck that's not fun to dance on, either too slippery or too hard. So I get very involved with the designers, and we talk about every step, because if you have to redo a deck, it's quite expensive. And so, I really take care of my dancers as best as one can in a show.
Well, I thank you for that. As we wrap up, I always end my shows with my homage to James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. And I've got my questions that I'm going to pose to each of you. This is off topic. So, Barry, I'm going to start with you. And my first question is, how do you spend the biggest chunk of your time that's off outside the theater? He's frozen. Did you hear me?
Well, lately it's been Duolingo. I did. Lately it's Duolingo. I have been studying Duolingo French for the last 478 days straight. I want to say something, that the further we get into the 21st century, the more I'm feeling nostalgic about the 19th. And so I have been also studying, and because I have been studying operetta scores on my own from the 1860s to the 1920s. And I wanted to see the evolution of music from Offenbach to the German composers, to Jerome Kern, to Gershwin. Everybody influenced everybody else. And I know that Kern influenced Gershwin and Porter and Berlin, but who influenced Kern? And it was the operetta composers from the previous generations. And I'm finding all of this fascinating. I don't care if anybody finds it interesting. I find it interesting. And I find that I'm discovering things about these men as composers and what their influences were. And at this point, it's keeping my brain going. The bad thing about learning French is that now I understand what a lot of these scores, and a lot of it is really inane and insipid. and I wouldn't have known this if I had just listened to it in the original language. So be careful what you wish for. But that's what's occupying my time. And I mean, what can I say? Randy, take it.
Okay. Randy, my question for you is, what is your most Freudian moment in the theater?
Now, what do you mean by Freudian moment? Explain
that. What is the strangest moment that you've ever had in the theater?
The strangest moment, there's been two. We were auditioning for the revival of 42nd Street in 2001. And of course, the show needed 36 dancers, all of a certain age. And somebody showed up to the audition, and she was quite elderly, and she was wearing basically a thong. So that took the room by surprise. We didn't quite know how to deal with it. So that people that day talked about it. And then the other thing that was similar was we were then having callbacks and more auditions. And we were in a theater at that time. The first, what I call my thong lady, that was in a rehearsal hall, a studio. So I don't know how she showed up to the actual building, but when she walked into the room, she was in a thong. When we were auditioning on stage, we had eliminated somebody who obviously could not do anything that we needed. And then on a break, she wandered back onto the stage and started singing a folk song. So, it just kind of always reminds you that everybody has their thing and everybody's in their world, and the arts attract a lot of people. And so she was quietly ushered back into the wings and out of the building. But those are two very memorable audition stories that you just kind of go, wow, they had something on their minds when they showed up that day. Yeah.
And now she's serving in the Congress.
That's bad.
Okay, Barry, what is the one thing? Yes, in a thong. in Stars and Stripes. Barry, what is the one thing about your work that you are the proudest of?
I think I try to put my worldview into everything that I write, and if you look for it, it's there. If you get it, fine. If you don't, it's okay. But I've never shied away from putting my beliefs in what I write, and I find that no matter what the project is, even what seems to be a simple review about Irving Berlin, there's an understanding underneath it about what I believe, as well as, if you look at Randy's work, what he believes. And I've tried to put that in everything I do. I don't know if I'm successful or not, but I try to instill that in everything I write.
Well, I think you are. Randy, what is the best gift that you've ever given someone?
Two things. Either their equity card or their Broadway debut.
Great answer.
It really, well, because I've witnessed it many times. As I said earlier in the interview, I love new people and I love meeting new people. And I'll never forget Dames at Sea. On opening night, Danny Gardner, who played Lucky, his dad came up to me before we went into the theater, just tears in his eyes, saying, "You have given me an incredible gift to see my son on a Broadway stage." Oh. And I know it's the same when you get an equity card, because it's not the easiest thing to do. Or prior it wasn't. Now it's a different policy right now for the next several years. But that's a real gift to people when you actually, it's a hard nut to crack. Broadway, you know, often that old story about how do you get a Broadway show if you don't have a Broadway show on your resume? Well, you've got to have somebody trust you and give you the first break. And that doesn't always happen because people want familiarity and they want to work with people they know. And then, so those are the two things that give me a lot of joy. Also, a third one, Richard. I take it for granted when you do a lot of big dance-driven shows. I'm used to having people react to dance numbers, but sometimes I'll get one of my dancers and they're on stage and the people leap to their feet when the chorus comes out, like in White Christmas or 42nd Street, big shows where the ensemble is an important part of it.
Or
And
when it starts to snow.
When it starts to snow. And I forget that, you know, they may never experience that again, or maybe they will. But that's delightful to see also when they go, wow, you know, audiences are standing for the ensemble.
That's right.
Yeah. So those things.
That's great. Barry, when did you have the strongest self-confidence in your career?
I'm sorry, when did I have the what?
The strongest self-confidence.
Oh my gosh. That's a really good question. I think I don't have self-confidence ever. I think that I wait for other people to let me know whether I've done the work or not. I think if you go into any project and say, this is it, I've done it, you're sunk. So you have to keep yourself open to whatever it's going to be. And listen, I was an actor. My first equity job, I had to go on for Paul Lind, who came down with hepatitis 24 hours before opening night in Dayton, Ohio, in front of 2,000 people. And they said, you're going on with a script in your hand. And I'm not kidding. I held up the pants, which were 2 sizes too big for me. So I held up the pants with one hand and I had the script in the other. And I went on for Paul. And I thought, if I survive this, you know, and the critics came and they reviewed my performance. They were there for Paul, but, you know, nonetheless, everything I said, okay, now I can do anything. And then comes the next thing. And you go, oh my gosh, here I am again. What now? And I think if you just approach each thing and say, here goes, I don't know what's going to happen, but here goes. You tell me. That's the way I do it. I think that's why I'm still here. I think.
Wow. Great.
I've never had that self-confidence. Maybe if I did, it would be different.
Randy, do you have a favorite love song written by Irving Berlin?
Oh boy, there's so many. I mean, I really do love You Didn't Do Right by Me. I love that song. It's not exactly a positive love song, but it certainly deals with love and unrequited love and all of that. I do love that moment whenever I hear it, whenever I see it in the movie or whenever I see it in the stage play or with Caitlin's performance. There's just something about it that I truly like. Yeah.
Okay. Barry, I'd like you to list 4 people that are part of your confidence building team. 4 people that build you up.
Wow. Well, Penny Fuller is one of them. She's always believed me, and that's a lovely thing. She believed I could do things that I didn't think I could do, and that's the kind of confidence. To Ken, theater historian, who's written many books on the theater and is my best friend. He's certainly. I would say my brother Neil in Chicago is also extremely supportive, and I would say Anita. Gillette also. I mean, these are people. It's interesting about Penny and Anita, who have worked with so many people. I mean, I also I had a wonderful experience working with Len Cariou, and Len is monosyllabic most times. He doesn't tell you what he's thinking. And so when I started working with him, I never knew whether he liked what I was doing or not. Because he'd say, "Is that the set?" And I'd say, "Yes." He'd go, "Hmm." So that wasn't very, that didn't give me the boost. But what I then found is what he was saying to other people about me. And that's where I realized I had his confidence. So I'd say that to survive in this business, if you don't have a good network of people who support and believe in you, you can't survive, because there are too many forces coming at you at any given time, and you need to know that you've got that security underneath. And I'm not talking about blind love. I'm not talking about they support you even when you're bad, but who are there for you, and you know they will give you that cushion. Having a cushion in this business is really, really important. So yeah, that would be my list.
Amen. Randy, what has been the biggest accomplishment personally in your life?
Wow, let's see. Biggest accomplishment. But that is really a hard thing to think about. Personally, you talking personally or anything? Professionally, personally?
Anything.
Like anybody would tell you, it's overcoming what you would call a gut-wrenching tragedy is probably, yeah. The things in life that if you survive, change you forever. And I had one of those. So it's just one of those things that I remember hearing Dolly Parton back in the 80s talk about that same topic, where she wouldn't reveal what it was, but she said she went through something that took her to rock bottom. And you don't think about Dolly Parton ever experiencing things like that.
Right.
Because of her persona. And I remember just really riveting on that and going, yeah, if that happens in life and you then overcome it without reaching for drugs or alcohol or you whatever. And they asked her how she got through it. And she said her religion, her spirituality, which she's very open about. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's probably the biggest accomplishment, is being able to, and it makes you a deeper artist. See, I never thought about that until you have something that really challenges you. And then from then on, everything about my art form changed. And that was the positive. It's kind of like I came out of that experience going, wow, I'm a different artist. I reacted to people differently, what I responded to, and it was life-changing. And in many ways, it moved me up the ladder, intellectually, spiritually, everything about it. Yeah.
And this is my last question, and it's for both of you. What do you think is the best thing about the world that we're currently living in? And I'm going to start with you, Barry.
What's the best thing about the world we're living in? I think it's both the best and the worst. I think we are able to communicate. We are able to reach people faster. You remind me. When Lillian Gish was towards the end of her life. I hate to bring up Lillian Gish, except that was a profound moment, which was that the interviewer asked her. He says, "You have lived through so many decades. What was the best time you ever lived through?" And she said, "Now." She said, "What, do you want me to talk about the good old days without refrigeration and air conditioning and cars?" And she said, the teens were terrible. She said, you have everything now that makes your life easier. So this is the best time. And what I would say is that that's where we're living in now, is a time where things are really kind of amazing. I think people don't, I tell young people, pick up a rotary dial phone and dial your number, and you're going to want to throw it across a room because to hear that it takes so much longer than you realize, and we just get used to these things. What I think what I would say. The other side of that is I think we've lost personal connection. One of the reasons I stick with the theater is that, and it happens every night at the York, is there's a personal bond when that curtain goes up or the lights come up on stage between the audience and the performers. And it's immediate, and you can feel it, and there's a communication that's going on that we can't lose because we're on the verge of losing it. People text rather than speak. So we're losing the sense of conversation totally because they're speaking in shorthand. So it's not even sentences. I think that for me, we have to hold on to that communication. It's why I do cabaret too. There's no fourth wall. If I see you, you see me. Let's get down to business. So that's what I don't want to lose. I think otherwise, technologically speaking, we're in the best world we've ever been in.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Okay, Randy?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that these are great times to live in because of all that we have. But I think what the last 18 months has taught a lot of people, and I see it in my students, it's made them examine ways of communication. Because of the isolation they went through, more people were actually talking on the phone, doing FaceTime, because they couldn't gather. And I hope they hang on. I hope everybody hangs on to this, because my degree was communications in college, and my minor was psychology. So I've been screaming for years, just watching how this was all shifting with people. And I always say that if you judge things by your solar plexus and your gut, if everybody's feeling fabulous, then great for all these new inventions. But if depression seeps in, anxiety seeps in, there's something going awry. And because I teach a lot and I'm with younger people, I know what's going on out there. And there is a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety in the younger people. And that shouldn't be. That you can't live a life like that every day. And a lot of it is due to the communication and the lack of the skills and the fact that nobody's connecting. So I'm glad that for 18 months, the positive is that people have rediscovered what they needed to do to feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to look at somebody and not just text the written word. So I'm hoping that sticks. We Americans tend to take a little bit longer to learn lessons. I remember after 9/11, I had to travel pretty quickly after that to go to Cleveland and open a show. And just the camaraderie and everybody that was talking. But it didn't take very long for people to revert to being crabby at the airports and pushing and not wanting to be patient. So sometimes you have to learn the lesson 2 or 3 times before it sticks. But, 18, 19 months of what people have gone through, maybe the lesson will stick and people will communicate a little bit differently besides texting. I'm hoping.
Well, I hope so too. And stick around for just a moment. I want to thank both Barry Kleinbort and Randy Skinner for being here this afternoon to celebrate the premiere of Cheek to Cheek, which opens officially Thursday night, and it will play through January 2nd at the York Theater, which is now at St. Jean's at 150 East 76th Street. They've moved uptown, new place. Tickets are now on sale, so go online and get the tickets. I will be there Wednesday night, God willing that I make my way through the traffic of a tree lighting in Midtown.
Right.
So I will be there. I want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who took the time to be here this afternoon. I know that I can speak for both Barry and Randy when I say this. Those of us who are in the theater, we don't take it lightly when you take the time to spend time with us. So whether you spend an hour with us this afternoon, or if you go to the York Theater, when you go to the York Theater, to escape everything that's going on outside and just escape into the world of Irving Berlin and Hollywood and great music and tap dancing and great singing and great artistry, you're going to thank all of us. So give yourself a present treat a friend doing this. If this was your first time here at Richard Skipper Celebrates, I hope it's not your last. My goal is to celebrate artists and their body of worth. Take a moment to leave a comment, tell your friends about this show. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go out, go to your Facebook friends list, and go to the second name that pops up and reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private message. Go to the second name on your list, call them up and say, there's a great new show that's playing at the York Theater. Why don't you join me and let's go together? They'll thank you. Now, I'm actually going to leave the screen right now, and I'm going to give Barry and Randy the final word. Anything that either of you want to say about anything that we've talked about today, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out. Barry, I'll start with you. When you finish, I'll take you off the screen. Just say goodbye. And then Randy, you'll have the final word. Just say goodbye and I'll end the show. Thank you both for being here. Okay. And I'll see you at the York Theater. Thank you both and happy holidays.
Thank you. Irving Berlin was one of the only composers who lived long enough to have his songs go into public domain, to experience his songs going into public domain, because he lived to 101. He actually lived to have Alexander's Ragtime Band go into the public domain. And I said that shortened his life considerably. I leave you with that. Goodbye.
Yeah, I just am so pleased to be able to bring something to the stage in these times where we really do need really wonderful melodies and entertainment to overcome what everybody's been going through and might continue to be going through. So do come, spread the word, come see us and hear these wonderful songs by an amazing man and learn about his journey. Thanks so much.